Okay. Just to pause my time. And in my
Okay. Do I need a mic? No. Always, the students always insist, because if you don't have a mic, it doesn't record, and then they can't listen to it afterwards. But I think unless you're recording, unless we're doing lecture capture, I don't need to speak to the mic. So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming, despite bad weather, busy times, but a hugely important topic, which I have the pleasure to introduce. So my name is Anina Kaltenbrunner. I'm Professor of Global Economics in the Economics Department, and I'm also Departmental Director of Research of the Economics Department. So I'm here both as a member of the department and also as a leadership representative. So first of all, I want to thank the organizers of this event, Bianca, Ezra, and Irene. She is not here, but she will pop here, because this is hugely important. We're a week later, but in terms of supporting female and women in economics, there is a lot going on, but there's loads more to be done. And as you will see in the discussion, probably, in a way, the reason why women in economics are still underrepresented are manifold. It has to do with we perceive economics, the requirement of economics, but in a way also what people think economics is and what economics does and what people do with an economics degree afterwards. So Bianca might be talking about this later, but members of our department, together with Peter, have been doing really interesting research with schools, trying to understand why girls, despite having similar A levels, the guys having similar ability in math, they don't choose to go in an economics degree, which really is still something that baffles us. And one of the things they found other things, but one of the things they found is that it seems to also have a lot to do with how students perceive what economists are and what they do. So they're all white male men in suits that work in banks. But economics is so much more than that. Economics is about understanding how society works and understanding how we can improve a society. And I deep inside, how many men are in this room now? Don't listen. But I think one of the reasons why women don't go to economics is because they deeply care about society. And I think we are attracted by doing work that is meaningful, that really changes things to the better and that helps members of society. And sadly, this is not always the way economics is being portrayed in the media, in the news, but also by teachers. But I've got good news, because the economics we do here in Leeds is slightly different. So we are really trying, and in a way, for those of you students here, I think you are in a very special place, because we're a very diverse department, we're a pluralist department, but really in a way what unites us is we want to make a difference to society. So we are, what we say on our website is we're interested in real world economics. And I think in that sense, we're also trying to, attract more students, but also in a way open wider debates about what economics is, does, and can do, and so also attract more women to economics, because actually I think it's a loss for economics that they're not for women. So then maybe then also to think about our department, it's pluralist. I did try to get some numbers about whether we are doing better in attracting female students. We sadly aren't, but we are very good in attracting female staff. So we have, I don't know whether we have more women than in other economics departments, but we have recently had a lot of women. And being a woman in that department, I also have the sense it's a very supportive one. And it's also a supportive faculty. So I don't know whether you know, but also our dean is a woman and is being very supportive. So we're kind of supportive from the top, our colleagues, but also as a department, what we're trying to do. So the events which are being put on by our colleagues, and we're trying to really develop also female mentoring schemes, et cetera, to support the women that have found their way into economics despite all the barriers. So with that, with no further ado, so thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for making time. Thanks so much for organizing this. And I really hope it continues these important debates which we're having in the department and beyond and the wider university. I hope it's useful. I sadly can't stay because I have to pick up my children from school talking about barriers. Having said that, I have a beautiful husband. He's really, really supportive. But today, Thursday, is my day. So I will sadly have to go cycle home, pick them up. But I hope you have a really wonderful event. And thanks again for organizing it. And I'll pass over to Maria, right?
So, hello everyone. Welcome to our event, the Royal Comic Society UK Women in Comics Network, hosted at the University of Leeds. So, first of all, I want to thank every one of you that are here today, all the students, all the staff. I want to thank my co-organizer, Esra, Bianca, Irene, and everyone who helped us to put up this event. And lastly, I want to thank our speakers who traveled here today in order to encourage, inspire you, and show you the diverse career paths that economics have. So let me introduce myself. I'm an academic. I work at Imperial College London, and I'm also a steering committee member at the Royal Economic Society UK Women in Economics Network. I lead the Inspire initiative, and this event falls under this initiative. So, in general, just briefly talk about the UK Women Economics Network. So, it was launched in February 2023. It supports economies, especially women. And the mission of UK Women Economics Network is to develop communities of economies, and in general, all of those, not only economics, not only women, all of those who advocate for supporting and increasing diversity in this profession. So within the UK Women Economics Network, we have 4 initiatives. We have the network, support, inspire, and action. We recently had in London on the 26th of February, the annual networking event at the Bank of England. And the Inspire initiative, which the one I lead, I particularly organize events with universities. I had also partnered with some organizations to support early career women economists, but the aim of this initiative is to inspire and encourage young women and those from underrepresented backgrounds that they are currently studying economics, either in undergraduate or postgraduate, to pursue a career in economics. We all know that women economics profession is underrepresented from women and those from disadvantaged backgrounds, and we want to encourage more of you to go and get a brilliant job and have careers in economics. We run events across the whole UK, including Edinburgh, Cardiff, Manchester, Birmingham, Southampton, and UCL. And yeah, it's a pleasure to be here first time at the University of Leeds. So if you are interested in more events at the UK Women Economics Network, it's free. You can sign up in the newsletter where you can get notifications about events with professionals, event to network, the majority of the events are in London, but I'm currently trying to organize events also some other locations which are more accessible to North. So hopefully, and also they're always online, which you can always join and get inspiration and knowledge and insights from them. So that's all from me. I want to invite our first speaker now, Nisha Kanju from Bank of England, who is going to talk to us about her experience and her professional journey so far. Yeah, and this one. Hello, everyone. Is this working? Yeah? Yeah, that's working. It's really lovely to be here. It's my first time in Leeds. So thank you so much for the organizers and also the attendees to give me the time, I suppose. So I set out today to explain sort of how my interest in development economics sort of led me to the Bank of England, and then taking a bit of a cross-disciplinary career there over the last 8 years. I'll touch on how I sort of went about making decisions on the next step, some challenges along the way, and hopefully some lessons from those. But I think the key thing that I would want to say is when I was at uni, I was very much fretting over having a proper plan, a 5-year plan, 10-year plan, where it's all going to lead to. Never would I have imagined the roles that I've done. And it's fine if there is no plan, you sort of build on it as you go through. But let me start with where it all began. So I've grown up in Bangladesh. I was there all the time till I came to the UK for my university. And I think that was sort of the start of me being interested in economics, because it's a very fast-growing, developing nation. It's got a lot of challenges, poverty, inequality, everything sort of all around you. So it sort of sparked my curiosity to understand why, things were the way they were, why there were these inequalities. And it also sort of, as I was doing my O-levels, it coincided with the time where there's a rise in sort of microfinance, the field of development economics was growing. Then Grameen Bank and Dr. Mohammed Yunus got the Nobel Peace Prize, and it got a lot of sort of global attention on these schemes. So I was very interested in development economics. And when my brother asked what I wanted to do for university, again, I found that a very difficult decision to make, but I thought that economics could be a path I go down, because what I thought was that it gave me a sort of language or framework to understand how human behavior works, why people do certain things the way they do. And so this book was very instrumental, I think, in me finally deciding to study economics at uni. It's like I said, it kind of gave me a valuable framework. You could see why different people could be making different decisions under like different concerns. So the book was really powerful in explaining why people in the lower sort of income distribution might be making different decisions to do with their savings, consumption, as opposed to people in the sort of higher quantiles. That then fast forwarded to quite a difficult period, I think, for me, where I landed in Homerton College, University of Cambridge, to do my undergrad degree in economics. Since 2014, I moved from everything that was familiar. My family is back home. And it was a lot to sort of come to the UK, sort of get used to a new culture, a new environment, all the while balancing the academic demands. And I think that was a very much formative 3 years. Don't know if I really liked all of it, but I think the way I look at it is I sort of struggled my way through, but that gave me a sense that if I can do this, I can do something as difficult going forward. What was, I think, very good is that it really gave me a strong foundation to sort of think about and learn and like push myself to do different things. But what I also understood was I wasn't very interested in just the theory and the abstract side of economics. I was more interested in policy. And essentially, like, how can we apply economics to real life situations, and how can we sort of help people along the way? So that then moved me to decide to do my master's in economic policy at UCL. I really enjoyed that course, mainly because it had a lot of applied modules. I got the chance to do more development economics, ethics in economics, sociology, etc., which were all really interesting to me. And at that point, a lot of my sort of friends were applying for investment banks, training internships, etc., consultancies, but that sort of didn't appeal to me. I was interested in a sort of life in public policy and was trying to figure out how that would go about. So I, in between 2017, when I finished undergrad and before starting master's, happened to then be at Bank of England for a 2-month internship, which I really enjoyed. And that sort of started my career.
After my master's in 2018, I joined the Bank of England as a graduate economist. And there, I think I realized the world of work is easier than studying, what I found, because I found that you'd never have to be stuck with something. There are people around you who can help. And in fact, you're rewarded to be collaborative. Not, I think what I found in Cambridge at least was you have to figure it out yourself, but you're not really getting as much help. Or people are a bit more competitive and don't really want to share the things, whereas the world of work is very different. So I started really enjoying it. The core part of the work was I joined the monetary analysis area of the bank. So that is the part of the bank that does a lot of analysis, modeling, producing forecasts, which helped the Monetary Policy Committee make its decision. And it was a very core part of the bank, and it really attracts a lot of super intelligent colleagues who happen to be very helpful and generous with their time. And that is very much where, like I was saying, as a solid brick wall, I built my foundations in policy. And I learned everything from knowing how to work a chart in Excel to like coding, etc., in econometrics, sciences, econometrics. And at that point, I was also, although I was at the start of my career, I was saying yes to a lot of opportunities, because what I thought was I have ample time. I really want to meet everyone across the bank, get myself sort of known, build my reputation, learn new skills. But that sort of made me curious after sort of spending, 2 years on, COVID happened, which I think there was a lot of opportunity in that crisis. It was a very busy time for the Monetary Policy Committee. Never have I been working 70 hours, but been that much that happy, because actually it was a really good period to be very creative. So all of the models and the data we were using stopped working in COVID, obviously, because the data we were looking at were quarterly, monthly frequency data, but the world was moving every minute and second like vastly. So there was this opportunity in there where we started working really hard to collect new data. And we started this whole host of data collection, which we call high frequency indicators. So these are sort of your Apple mobility, Google mobility data, consumption from, every time you tap your card. These were data we had never tapped into before, but now we were getting these in volumes. And we're looking at all sorts of, from traffic data, lorries going through Dover, what's happening to all of that. But what that meant was we had a huge amount of large data set. I wouldn't really call it big data, but it felt big data for an economist, because we were just interested in, we were used to coding a little bit, perhaps some data e-views to write our models, but we were not used to, at least I wasn't equipped to think about how to store this amount of data. So we had to work with a part of our bank called Advanced Analytics, which was full of sort of data scientists, data engineers who helped sort of grab the data for us in these unconventional ways, like you scrape websites, etc. And at that time, I realized maybe there's a bit of a gap in the skill set for me. I wasn't very comfortable in coding, and I couldn't sort of figure this out myself. And I really enjoyed doing this side of the data science aspect. And so the Bank of England was running its apprenticeship scheme. So, during COVID, everyone got a pet. I decided to do another master's. So I did the data science master's. I started that in 2020 alongside work, which the next 2 years I didn't realize would be as busy as I decided when I decided to do this. But anyway, that went along alongside the work. But what I also was thinking was I had been working in monetary analysis surrounded by very intelligent economists, but I was only working with people who were very similar to me in the sense of like professional background. And I was interested in working with people across the bank. So the Bank of England is a huge institution. It's got over 5,000 people working, whereas in monetary analysis there are only 200 people. So I wanted to find out what's going on across the bank and what are the people doing there. I was, like I said, I was saying yes to a lot of opportunities early on. So I was very much interested in working in diversity and inclusion. I was already in some of the staff working groups. And this happened to be the time after the murder of George Floyd, where a lot of organizations were doing a lot of internal thinking on what are they doing for ethnic diversity and inclusion. So that launched what is the Court Review on Ethnic Diversity and Inclusion. So the court is our board of directors who commissioned this review, and a team was put together, which was an interdisciplinary. So I joined that team as the economist. So I was doing micro data analysis almost, looking at HR data, figuring out how are outcomes of minority ethnic colleagues different than non-minority ethnic colleagues along, like, are they getting promoted as much, performance ratings, bonus, etc. But this was the first time I was in part of a team which collected people from across the bank. And it was very much an interdisciplinary team, which I think was a bit like an orchestra. So you had people who were comms expert, who were change management expert, who were experts in dealing with culture change. As you can imagine, it's a sort of a difficult topic, or people get passionate about it. So you needed not just economists, you needed people who knew how to navigate this entire thing. And I loved working there because I loved the creativity of being able to start something from scratch. There was no sort of sense on how this project should work, what should be the outcome, but we all designed it together. So I think in many ways, like an orchestra, we were better as a whole than the sum of the parts. After that, I decided that actually I quite enjoy being in a team with different professionals, not just economists. So then I joined what is now called monetary policy transformation. So what happened during COVID and following is the Bank of England's forecasts, if you have followed, hasn't been great. But anyway, it's been a challenging time. So the bank then had Ben Bernanke launch a review on monetary policy, which showed that the bank was deficient in a lot of the ways in it was producing the forecasts. There were issues with data infrastructure, modeling, organizational stuff, people, capability, etc. So it was very much a whole host of things that needed improvement. So following the recommendations of the Bernanke Review, we launched a large-scale transformation program called the Monetary Policy Transformation. And I joined that as an economist, an economic advisor. So here I was working with professions that I never heard of before. User centered design, business analysts, software developers. Like, I didn't really work with them before, but I really enjoyed that. I joined as a subject matter expert, but as I was doing that, I realized that I started getting interested in organizational design. So we were thinking about how do we group. We currently have this divisional structure. How can we make sure we group people? They're more sort of agile in what they're working. They move around to work on topical areas, etc. So there I was doing, let's say, less analytically economics work, but I used my background to work with like a cross-disciplinary group, trying to explain to them and think about how monetary policy formulation could be better. Then I thought it was a bit of a time for a break. And the Bank of England is great in that it allows for unpaid leave. So you can take unpaid leave and come back to the role at the same scale. So pretty much last year, I had like 8 months off. I went back to see my family at home, spent a lot of time traveling. It was a bit of a reset. I started missing the analytical side that I started with. And I realized that really I've not done much with my master's in data science, and I wanted to apply that. And so I came back in January of this year into a senior data scientist role in one of the new teams that I was giving a recommendation in back in 2023. This is a team full of data scientists who will now help with the implementation of this monetary policy transformation, and in particular to do with how our data platform and infrastructure needs to change. And therefore, a lot of our processes, depending on it, need to be refactored and moved into this new platform. So that really does require me to go back to my coding skills, go back to working with data engineers and learn how all of that works. But I think the main point is it's very complementary to the economic side. So I've not really left the economic side. It's more, I want to sort of supercharge myself with a lot of the other skill sets and then sort of come back to it. And so I think, like, looking back, I think the dots connect in that I've tried to collect different types of skills going through, but obviously when it was happening, it felt uncertain. And I sort of did a lot of personal questioning. And I think a common thread has been I've been driven by curiosity and a need that I want to learn this new skill. And that's sort of how I've gone around it. Now, I did have challenges along the way, but they were more personal or internal in nature rather than technical, let's say. So taking this sort of non-traditional path, because a lot of my colleagues in a traditional sense are just progressing as an economist, working still in monetary analysis or adjacent work. But I sort of went into organizational design, data science, user-centered design, etc. And in each step, I think there's a lot of self-doubt, and this is pretty much a depiction of how my brain looks like at any point in time. I was questioning, particularly when I went to do the code review on ethnic diversity and inclusion, thinking, oh, am I leaving behind monetary analysis? Will my economic skills be discounted? Will I be able to come back to monetary analysis? And actually, each of them really built it because I did a different side of economics, like microeconomic analysis on micro data sets. I had the same feeling even before taking my time off work last year. But I think sort of looking back, it does make me more versatile and stronger, I think, in having this sort of range of skills. I also had the issue that I'm often the only person in the room who looks like me. And I think that comes with a lot of pressure that I probably put myself into in thinking that I need to perform the best or I need to sort of represent a certain group. And I mean, I still sort of deal with that, but I think there's also this element of how I've been brought up culturally. So back home in Bangladesh, you wouldn't really speak over elders, whereas here I learned soon that at meetings you have to put your views, even if there's like lots of people in the room who are more experienced. So that took a bit of training for me to sort of raise my hand, put my foot in, and give my point of view, even if I don't agree with the rest of the group. And I think there's also been this sort of imposter syndrome, which has been constant. And in particular, coming back from my pause last year into this team of data scientists, as a senior data scientist, as someone who hasn't worked for a while, like last year I didn't work, I'm not surrounded by very intelligent and capable data scientists, but I feel often that, oh, is this the right place for me? Am I doing the right thing? And I try to sort of battle that, thinking that, you know, I need to give myself a bit of grace, a bit of time, and in, let's say, a 6-month year's time, I will also be able to get to their level, but also I'm probably bringing different skills from the background as well. But yeah, it's a constant sort of struggle in that sense. But before I guess I close, I wanted to bring the presentation together by drawing out what I think were the most useful lessons from my slightly non-linear journey. First, I would say that I've always sort of followed anything that's genuinely interested me. There's not been a plan in many cases, but that has served me well as far as like so far. Promotions generally have followed, even if I hadn't thought that it would, and I took a bit of a risk, but it has happened in that sense. So I think there is sort of a value in doing what you are interested in, because genuinely you would probably do better at doing that and, you know, playing to your strengths in that sense. I think adaptability, particularly in the current situation we're in, is very important. So there's a quote I like that it says, there are decades where nothing happens and there are weeks where decades happen. I think we're currently going through what is a VUCA world. So it's highly volatile, complex, uncertain and ambiguous. And I think in this sense, those who are more able to adapt, learn, pivot, and grow with each of the roles swiftly are people who would be successful. Then for me, the other thing was visibility. I realized sort of early on, this is why I was saying yes to a lot of opportunities early on, is that you sort of need to start building a reputation, getting your name and face out there. And that really helped me because there were many cases where I had done some extracurricular things like around the staff diversity network or something else, which really isn't to do with the economics line of work. But through that, I got to know people, or people got to know me, and then they'd reach out to me if they wanted to get something done and if I was interested in that, which I wouldn't have that sort of element coming through if I had sort of stuck to just my day job, let's say. And networking. So relatedly, I think there's a lot of value in not just doing the work you're meant to be doing, but also I do think relationships open doors. It's not just because of the point of opening doors, it's more that it's really helpful to have a network of people you can get advice from, you can trust, you can sort of vent to as well. And I've been really lucky that in the Bank of England, there has been that sort of culture, and I've got these sort of little groups where if I have a problem with certain things, I know who I would go to get some thoughts and advice. And in particularly whilst I was navigating this sort of non-linear journey, at each point, like I said, I had a lot of self-doubt, but I went to speak to different colleagues who may have done something similar somewhere else and tried to figure out why they made the decisions for themselves. Did like a lot of pros, cons list, but ultimately sort of went with my gut. But it really helps to get different perspectives on the different things. So I guess if I could leave you with one thing is that if you start studying economics, it could sort of lead you in many directions. I think it does open doors. It's not about just the economic theory. It's more about the skill set of being able to learn something, being able to adapt. And it is very much versatile and transferable, I think. Once you're sort of well-versed with data analysis and an analytical way of thinking, there are many sort of places you could apply that to, be it to like strategic development, organizational change, but also the sort of data science and that sort of area. So the other thing is obviously once you've got your foot in, in the world of work, I think it's worth that it's perfectly fine to not have a linear path and not know how everything's going to pan out. I'm always sort of envious of people who do have 5-10-year plans. I often think, would that have made me better? But it's sort of, in hindsight, worked out well, but it's only in hindsight you're able to connect the dots then, as you're going through it. But yeah, so that's all I sort of wanted to share today. And thank you so much for your time and for listening.
So we've got our next speaker, Elizabeth Marligale from Oxford Economics.
Okay, everyone can hear me. Great, well, thank you so much for that first kind of presentation. I think it was really interesting and really great advice at the end. I would definitely follow everything that she just said. My presentation today is going to talk to you about a different type of career path, which is in economic consultancy. I hope by the end of the presentation that you can see that we are very relatable in that I was in your position 10 years ago, something like that, worrying that I wasn't going to do well, and somehow I managed to, and how economic consultancy is a real viable option for all of you. I'm going to talk a little bit about my career journey, takeaways from the private sector and some advice, what it's like at my current job, and then also I'm going to touch on what it's kind of like as a woman in economics. So I'm currently a senior economist at Oxford Economics. I've been there for 5 years now. 5 years? 4 years. 4 years. And I think I've had a little bit of a back and forth journey, different to Nishad in that I have tried lots of different things. And I believe that no one of those decisions was a mistake, even though at the time it really wasn't what I wanted to do. It's all got me to where I am now. So I would say to you guys, it's kind of like that first step, getting that first job, no matter what the job is, will get you to the job that you want eventually. That's at least been my experience. So I found A-levels really, really challenging. I ended up getting a B and 2 Cs, really not what I wanted to get. I did my bachelor's in economics at MMU, which I really enjoyed. But during that time, and I'm sure quite a lot of you have maybe thought about the same thing, I was wondering, well, what is it that I want to get out of work? And I was thinking, I want to earn money. So I decided to go down the finance route. I decided to go into kind of, financial controlling. And then I worked as a financial consultant for KPMG. And during that time, I realized I didn't want to be in finance. So I was like, right, I'm going to go back to uni. I'm going to find some sort of economics that really interests me, and I'm going to go from there. And I did my master's in development economics at the University of Manchester, which I absolutely loved and would do it again and again and again if I could afford it. I would call it luck, because I studied my master's during COVID. Therefore, I had 0 distractions. And I actually took advantage of all of my reading lists and read them all. And I would recommend you to read more of your reading lists if you feel like you can. And after that, I landed my job at Oxford Economics, and I'm still there, and I don't see myself leaving for a long time. I absolutely love it. So aside from like the career kind of thing, I also had a lot of fun on the way, which I think is the most important thing, to kind of sow your oats before before you get into your career path. Of course, you can take time out, long time, short time, but I just did what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to study abroad. I knew I wanted to work abroad, and I knew I wanted to do a ski season, and I did it all, and it was amazing. And would definitely recommend you all to, if you have a life goal, just don't question it and do it. Kind of similar to what Nisha was saying is that, your areas of interest are so important. I kind of discovered these on my master's, gender economics, economics of institutions, health economics, and the economics of trust. Why is this so important? You might not feel it now because obviously all the jobs that you are going to apply for are very broad. If they're called economist or they're called advisor, and you're like, why does it matter if I like gender economics? It might not matter in that first job, but it will matter once you've built confidence at your company or wherever you work, and they notice that you have this interest and they want to use it. Or maybe you find, after a couple of years experience, there's another job that you can go for. So explore those interests, don't be afraid. I don't know if you guys have to do a dissertation or not. I really, really enjoyed mine, and if you have the choice to do one, I would 100%. I know there's all this scariness around it, but it's really not scary when you find something that interests you. And I guess moving on from me and more about the private sector and consultancy. So what is it? Because at least when I graduated, especially from my bachelor's, I genuinely thought there was 3 options for me. 1, to stay in academia, 2, to work for the government, and 3, to work in finance. So I went in finance. But there is this world of consultancy and economics. And what do? Well, we really do all of the things that people do in academia, that people do in the government, and that people do in finance, but all together. So, research, analysis, helping governments make decisions and thinking about policies, but really the main focus of our business is we do these things for other businesses. So it's a profit-making industry. So it's slightly different thinking than when you come from academia or government, where it's not. And I think there can be some negative connotations to that, but to be a good consultant, you have to have a really good reputation. So it's not about cutting corners, it's still about producing that quality. It's just in a different way. So yeah, the client really is the priority. So you could be, using some sort of economic methodology for one client, and then a different client in a completely different sector, you have to think about something completely different. So it can be really interesting. There are many employers that you might not actually think do economic consultancy. So obviously you have the smaller consultancies that I've listed there that have kind of economics in the name. There's also kind of financial market service companies, management consultant companies, and of course the Big Four. I don't know if all of the Big Fours have economic departments in London. Certainly KPMG and PwC do. And busted myths about the private sector, which I think is really important because, I obviously work for KPMG, so I have experienced some of these things, although that wasn't in economics, so I can't say for that. But I think people think, consultants, all they do is work long hours. It's really high stress. You work with horrible managers, and you have really difficult clients. Not the case. Like I said, the work is so diverse. You work with companies from all over the world, from every different kind of sector. Even we work with universities doing impact studies. We work with everybody. And that also means that we have to have a diverse group of people working for us with different specializations. So there'll be an expert in IO modeling sit in one corner of the office, and then an expert in geospatial modeling in the other corner of the office. So you've always kind of got somebody to ask things about. And I think as well, it's profit making, we have to be competitive. So we have to be kind of at the forefront of what are those like hot topics like environmental economics and things like that. And that brings me on to Oxford Economics. I don't know if anyone's heard of it, but I actually have in my team at the moment 2 placement students from the University of Leeds, and I previously worked with a grad from the University of Leeds, so somehow you have heard of us. But yes, we're a relatively small company founded 1981 in Oxford, basically by ex-Oxford University students, and now we've kind of grown to the biggest private economic consultancy company in the world. Over 600 staff, 20 offices, and the most kind of private sector economists that you'll see in one place. So lots of clever people. And really the business is split in two. So we have our consultancy side and our subscription side. And that's basically subscription, which is where I work at the moment. Imagine like when, you're doing a university project and you go onto the World Bank data bank to find your data. We have our own data bank, or Oxford Economics data bank. So we have like hundreds of people forecasting national level variables, city level variables, and industry level variables across the world. So we have an extensive data bank that we update very regularly. The other side of the business is our consulting side, and that's more like you have a question to answer from a client. So we're using the data that we do in our subscription services along with client data to tell them something that they want to know, like what is the aviation sector in what is Manchester Airport's outlook for the next 50 years? How many more customers could it have? That could be an example of a question. And what do? I put this here as just an example of there are so many things that you can do in economics, so many things probably don't know exist. When I graduated, never in my life would have thought I'm going to be forecasting cities across India. That's what I do at the moment. So I have to know all the states, all the districts, all the cities, and know what's going on and come up with informed forecasts as well for some other places. And one kind of hot topic in city economics at the moment is this thing called megacities. So megacities are cities with populations over 10 million. So obviously India already has quite a few. But we look at things like what is that going to look like across the world by 2050? And you can see kind of in the map by the red dots that the most new cities that are upcoming as megacities is in Africa and Asia. So there's going to be so many new markets, so much more people, so much more spending, more houses that are going to need building, all of these kind of things. I guess the last thing I want to talk about was gender and diversity in economics, my experience and just maybe a little bit of advice. So yeah, it can't be ignored that it's a problem. I mean, it's a problem in most industries. And I would say, I mean, I've never worked for the government, but I've heard that it's much better than in the private sector. I've experienced many situations where I'm the only woman in my team, and it can be quite difficult, especially when you're starting out. I know Maria mentioned that WEN had their annual kind of conference a couple of weeks ago. I found it completely crazy because we had some unbelievably senior women in economics talking, and they were talking about how they go into rooms and there's, not many people that look like them and they feel afraid to speak up, even after a 30-year career. So it sounds a little bit disheartening, but I think the advice that I got from that event was you just have to kind of have a little conversation with yourself and be like, just go for it. Don't overthink, don't try your best to just get that imposter syndrome out the back of your head. Because if you're in the right place where you're respected, you'll be listened to. And also it sounds strange, but sometimes being that like individual in a room can be to your benefit a little bit because it makes your voice heard more. It makes you stand out a little bit more. And there's all this research around if anyone, is interested in gender economics, or it doesn't even have to be gender, any other kind of diversity, it leads to better business decisions, different ideas, higher productivity, better communication, better understanding of people. This allows us to work better together. So it's kind of good for everyone. So I guess that is don't be afraid. If you walk into a room for people that don't look like you can do it. And I guess what else can you do apart from it's kind of your own mental thing? It's identify your allies, because there are many of them. Obviously, this event is a great example of there are many. And I think people always think, oh, they have to be other women or they have to be someone that looks like me. They don't. They just have to be somebody who also cares. So managers, mentors, or other colleagues. It's important to have good relationships with your colleagues. That will help you. Get involved with societies. So like the Women Economic Society, I would definitely recommend, or the Royal Economic Society, definitely recommend getting involved. At Oxford Economics, we actually also have our own women's kind of society. So it's called the Oxford Economics Women Plus network, and we essentially do exactly what WEN do, but on a smaller scale. So trying to connect female colleagues together, going out to universities and trying to encourage everyone and anyone to get into the field, because it's great once you're there. And of course, keep up to date or contribute to kind of D&I related research and economics research on that level. Maybe think about it as a dissertation topic, or it's just reading books or things like that. And yeah, the last thing I would say is, this is something from my experience. I've never been afraid to kind of say what I think if something's wrong. Obviously, you've got to do it in a nice way, but don't be afraid to challenge where you see something not being right. Today, there is no excuse for it. So we are kind of the future of the sector or the industry, right? It's our job to make sure that it's how it should be. So you guys all being here, obviously you already care. So it's great. I have a question and answers here, but we'll do that at the end. But yeah, I really hope that you have kind of seen that. I don't know what you guys are thinking in terms of your next career, whether you're worried, but you can do it. And maybe the answer is in economic consultancy or somewhere else, but you just have to kind of believe in yourself, and no job is a mistake. Like, this job will get you another job, which will get you another job, which will get you into something that you really enjoy. Like now, I loved development economics. I was so interested in India's economy. I'm now forecasting that. I'm also doing gender writing, which is something I never thought I'd be doing. So it's possible. Thank you.
So I know we are running a little bit over time. I think I'm going to try not to be very long, but it's a pleasure to be here to talk to you a little bit about my trajectory, how I became an economist and how I made these decisions. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my background. Then I'm going to move on to how I end up being an academic. And then finally, talk a little bit about some potential advice that you may find useful. Right, so this picture here was taken in 1995. I was 5 years old. And this is my cousin, Vinny. He's, despite being my cousin, he's like a brother to me. So I think I always looked up to him. And Vinny and I were very close, and still are very close as children. And we would very often play together. So I would see Vinny having aspirations as being a scientist and the CEO of the companies. And I think this also allowed me to feel more or less comfortable in environments where there were a lot of boys. So when we were children, we used to play quite a lot of hide and seek, for example. And I would play with his friends. And I remember they expected so little from me because I was a girl and I couldn't run as fast. And therefore, but instead of making me feel diminished, I would see that as a challenge, because when I managed to win the game, I would feel like, oh yeah, now you listen to me. So I feel like a bit this about economics, about my profession, right? So despite nowadays we have more or less about all over the UK, about 30% of academics being women only. I think when I look back and try to think about my background, I think this is what allowed me not to be as uncomfortable in such a situation. So, of course, women are generally expected to take careers and pathways that are related to care and some things like that. So I remember when I did this psychological test as a child, as a teenager, to try to find out what kind of career was the most suitable for me. The result was economics. And I came back home saying, wow, look, I decided I'm going to apply to study economics. And the reaction of lots of people was like, economics? that doesn't really look like you. Have you considered studying something like psychology, which is known for being having a very strong participation of women? But my family was very supportive, even though they found this was a little bit different from what they expected. And I decided to then go ahead and pursue this career in economics, even though I think at the age of 17 or 18, at least in Brazil, where I'm from, we don't really have A levels. So I never studied economics before. So it was a bit of a shot in the dark. I didn't know exactly what I was doing, but I trusted this kind of psychological test that really worked out, actually. But this stereotype, once again, I think became part of my journey. So overcoming this sort of like different expectations that people had from me was something that I have always been doing throughout my journey. So even nowadays, I still hear from sometimes friends or people in my family saying, wow, can you believe who would have thought that that little girl would have become an economist? So it's not about the fact that I went into academia and decided to do a PhD. That doesn't surprise them. What surprises them is the career of being an economist. Right, so this picture here, this is what my mom still has in my former bedroom in Brazil, which were my porcelain dolls, which were my first students when I was schooling as a child. So teaching for me has always been something that I was really loved. It was always a dream. So as a child, I remember saying that I wanted to become either a teacher or a secretary or a cashier, which are very gendered stereotypes about jobs that are usually taken by women. So while my cousin was dreaming about doing something like being a scientist, the CEO of a company, I would have thought about secretary or a teacher. And I think that was a very right decision for me. This is something I really liked, and I'm very happy for the pathway I've chosen. But I think one of the challenges for me is that I haven't really, as a child and as a woman, as a person nowadays, I haven't ever really been a shy person, but I was quite insecure. And the challenge then was, how can I become a teacher if I'm constantly having this imposter syndrome in the back of my head, where I don't deserve to be here, I'm not good enough to be here. So I found that this kind of voice, it doesn't really disappear. It doesn't really change, especially in the short term. However, I think if you really have this dream of becoming a teacher one day or doing any kind of jobs that require representation or exposure, if this is really what you want, eventually you have to just be brave enough to put yourself through these situations, and eventually you end up to overcoming these situations. I'm not sure if it's ever going to be 100% that you're never going to have this imposter syndrome in the back of your head, but it does get a lot better. And research, I think, also came naturally from curiosity. So you hear like lots of children asking questions, why all the time, and adults getting a little bit impatient, why children are asking why all the time. But as a child, more than asking why, I would ask very often, how do you know this? I was very curious to understanding how people knew that information more than the information itself, which I like to think it's a bit of an early instinct for epistemology. Research was the first job that I had as an undergrad student. So I joined back in Brazil when I was doing my undergrad in economics, 2 different research groups on energy economics. So that was the first time I was working, and I quite enjoyed that, though the topic in energy economics wasn't really for me. So I kept changing until I found my area, which is nowadays more about related to international economics. But research, in a way, has always been there, even before teaching, right? So teaching, of course, as a girl, but then eventually
moved into research. So I think academia in that sense is really a very good fit for me, because it allowed me to mix both of these areas that I really enjoy. First, teaching, second, research. But my pathway has always been that clear. So when I started studying economics, once again, I didn't really know what economics was precisely about. I had a good idea because I liked history, I liked geography, I liked mathematics. So that was what I based my choice on. But even as an undergrad student, I always wanted to do a PhD. But I don't really think I knew what it meant to do a PhD as a young woman. But I think it was mostly driven by the desire of, through education, reaching as high as I could. I come from a family that gives a lot of value to education, and in my head, this was the way to reach the top of my career, even though I didn't know exactly what to do about it. So I think what really changed my aspirations was when I came to Leeds to do my master's in 2013, so nearly 13 years ago. And in the master's, which is a bit, I would say, very intense kind of undergrad degree. So you start learning economics in another level, and it's really, really intense because it only lasts for 1 year. And that's when I started really to take an action about thinking about potentially doing a PhD. And Nina is no longer here, but she was my both master's and PhD supervisor. So I think having the role model of Nina, especially as being a woman, a female economist, also, of course, gave me a little bit this impression that, yeah, women can do this kind of job. She was a role model for me in that sense. So I guess that one of the questions that Maria asked me to address here is to talk a little bit about academia and what does an academic do. I guess that you've been working as students, undergrad students, you've been working together with us, so you should have some idea of what we do. But I thought it would be great to discuss this a little bit. So perhaps the most obvious one is teaching, right? So a huge part of what we do is to teach in the classroom. But teaching requires you to do a lot of prior study before that, right? So we have to prepare quite a lot when we come to teach. And especially here, I like to think here in our department, we are mostly a research-driven kind of institution. So our teaching takes a lot from what we study. So we like to bring fresh ideas into the classroom, to challenge old established ideas in economics, and probably have seen this quite a lot throughout your degree. And I think teaching is a lot of fun when you see that students are very engaged with what you're saying, right? So if you go to a seminar where students are actually asking lots of questions, are participating, that's where you get the joy from teaching. That's the fun part about it. And it's, even though, of course, we have more experience than you do, we have been studying economics much longer than you do, it's all about the exchange, right? Because sometimes students come up with questions that we haven't considered before. So it's not a one-way kind of street, right? So this exchange is also a huge part of the fun part of what we do. The second one, once again, especially those of you who are final year students who have started to write a dissertation, supervision is also part of what we do. We supervise undergrad, master's, and PhD students. And that's also a moment for a lot of intellectual exchange, right? So a student comes up with new ideas, perhaps something that I haven't seen before, I haven't studied before, but precisely this exchange of opinions, feedback, it's very rich. So I ended up reading about things that I have never learned before. So it's a very enriching experience for both sides, not only for the student, right? So usually the questions, the research questions that our students come up with are very fascinating, and it's also a very fun part of what we do. Then there is a bit of research, which is, of course, really important. And research involves lots of things, involves lots of writing, lots of reading, studying really hard, presenting at conferences, getting your findings, and presenting it to people to see their reactions, to hear different opinions, to get some feedback. And finally, getting accepted and rejected into journals. So academics, what we try to do with our research is to publish this research in widely recognized journals. I think other professions do not have the urge to get their work published. Sometimes they have issued reports and things like that, but not in academic journals. And getting rejected is also a hard part of economics. I think, you know, after you invest so much time into that research and you put, you know, a lot of effort to write that paper, invest a lot of time in that research question, getting rejected is not an easy thing, right? So, but it's part of our jobs, and what we do, we improve that paper, and then we continue to try to publish in different journals after addressing the feedback that we are given. So this is also part of our job. And in terms of research, we also do quite a lot of collaborations. So we have collaborations with our colleagues in the department. We have collaborations across different departments. So economics is a very, very broad discipline. So sometimes we have collaborations with different faculties, different departments. We also have collaborations across different countries. And this is a very fun part of our job. We get to engage with people from completely different backgrounds, completely different perspectives, to try to find a common theme or work towards addressing a certain research question. And we also work with a bit of like wider kind of projects. Lots of us go ahead and do sort of like policy work, working, for example, with the Bank of England. We get invited to deliver talks and speeches in sometimes newspapers, interviews with radios, podcasts, anything as you can imagine. Some of us also take advisory roles, and above all, we try to develop professional networks and also engage with societies, to engage with people that are, for example, doing research on a similar topic as you do. We also, in academia, have lots of leadership roles. So this is a pathway that you can decide to take within academia. So lots of us working here are responsible for shaping programs, meaning what is the syllabus of what you're learning, what is essential for an economist, someone studying an undergrad at the University of Leeds, what is essential for them to learn, what should be part of their core modules, let's say, to support students. So this is also another very important role in our job, and to influence the direction of the department. So as a department, collectively, what are we trying to do with economics? How are we pushing the frontier of knowledge in terms of economics? So this is also part of what we do. So I think the main takeaway from here is that doing a PhD is just a pathway that opens many doors for you. Doing a PhD does not necessarily mean that you're gonna follow an academic kind of pathway. Doing a PhD means that you're going to spend 3 to 4 years developing a research that you're very passionate about, something that you deeply care about, and you're also going to develop yourself, right? Because I think this is something that is very different to other types of jobs, is that when you're in academia, you also have to learn to gain skills in terms of presentations, to hear your voice, to try to find who you are in the world of economics, what you think, what are your, let's say, the theoretical framework that you are basing yourself on. But academia, as I said, is just one possible pathway. It's not the only one. So many people who do a PhD end up working for example, think tanks, sometimes international organizations like the World Bank, IMF, you name it, the BIS, the Bank for International Settlements. These international organizations usually have a whole department only focused on research. So having this PhD kind of skills is very important for this type of organization. Central banks, once again, central banks also require lots of research, so that's quite important. In private sector, right? So you may also choose to work for a company that works on a very specific topic that may be very well related to what you do. All of these organizations, of course, also need very, very strong research analysis. So, talking now a little bit about the way I navigate my career as a woman in economics. So I would say, of course, lots of these challenges that I'm going to discuss here are not only about economics and it's not only about academia. But I think the first challenge that I encountered as being a woman in economics, and by the way, this is sometimes things that I have experienced myself or that I have observed other women experiencing. But for example, finding our voice is a bit of a challenge, right? Sometimes we experience situations that we call mentorrupting, and I think once again this goes much beyond academia, which is when men decide to step in and intervene while a woman is talking. So this is something that unfortunately happens quite a lot. It happens during presentations in conferences and so on. So finding your voice, which is already an uncomfortable thing to do, is hard enough. And when you have someone interrupting that voice, makes it even harder. The strong presence of male in conferences and meetings also gives us the impression of being so small and that perhaps our opinion doesn't matter that much. It's really uncomfortable to put yourself out there to say what you really think. And this is something that if we only have so many undergrads graduating, female undergrads graduating every year, it's much harder to then address these issues further down the pipeline, right? So how can we improve the share of female economists at the universities if there are not many women graduating economics? We also have that emotion is frequently interpreted as a sign of weakness rather than humanity. I also see situations such as when women are a little bit more outspoken, they are deemed as aggressive. And if they keep quiet, they're just being passive, right? So it feels like that there is no way of adjusting to this, that society somehow is going to criticize what we are doing. So this is also difficult. There is also the situation of sometimes recognition being given to men more than it is to women, even though both people may be contributing to the same work in a similar way. And finally, we also experience quite a lot of overconfident people sometimes asking unnecessarily aggressive questions. And this happens very often in conferences, and especially with something that's in psychology, it's called the peacock behavior. So my partner, he did a PhD here at the University of Leeds about body language. So I'm quite aware of this type of situations, but very often we see men behaving with their hands open like that, which is not that men have the intention to make women feel belittled or anything like that, but it's because they feel very comfortable in this kind of settings, especially when the gender disparity is a problem to women, not to men, right? But I learned quite a lot from this. This is, of course, still a learning process. It's not something that I have it all figured out and everything is fine. Of course, this is still something that I have to work, and many women have to work with on a daily basis. So it goes, first of all, goes much beyond academia, right? So this is not a problem that we see only in academia. I find, at least from my experience, that emotionally it drains a lot of energy if I try to behave in this level of perhaps aggressiveness or overconfidence that I see a lot, some women do, but it's not me, right? So I don't want to have this emotional tiredness that gives me to try to fit a mold that is not mine. I also learned that I think lots of female stereotypes is often seen as weaknesses. And this is an advice that I actually got from a colleague in my department that said to me once that the challenge is not to try to change myself, but to make others see value in the way I am. So not to try to behave more in a more aggressive way or anything like that, but just show to others that the way I am is also fine. And I think I also have benefited enormously from women-focused networks. So I was lucky enough that in our department, there was this opportunity, for example, to apply for this female network called Aurora, which helps women to sort of like step in, finding their voice and so on and so forth. So that was amazing. And also some other supportive initiatives from the Royal Economic Society, for example, that I had female mentorship for women. So that was also very to pair up more experienced lecturers and professors with less experienced women, young scholars in that area. So that I found that very helpful. So if I could give any advice for future economists, I would start with, you have to learn how to impose yourself, because space is rarely just going to be given to you. So you have to fight for it and you have to learn to fight for it. Don't wait until you feel ready. Don't wait until that moment where you're going to know better, where you're going to be more confident, because actually confidence grows through action. It grows as you get more experience and that you put yourself out there. Seek out women's network. I found this really, really helpful. I've done this, and I find these communities very supportive in terms of sharing their perspectives, some solidarity, and some also practical strategies on how to navigate these challenges and these difficult situations that women face every day in or outside academia. Protect your boundaries. So there are quite a lot of research saying that women are much more prone to say yes to any work demands that is given to them. And I think saying no does not necessarily mean something negative to you. So it's also very important to pause and think about what you can take in or what is being too much for you. And also to remember that not every single criticism deserves your attention, deserves your energy. And finally, when we think about situations, for example, in conferences and so on, it's really important to separate what is constructive feedback to just performative aggression, right? So you should only respond to what is constructive feedback, to what is actually helping you to advance your research, to advance your work. And most importantly, once again, I think it's really important to emphasize this. You don't need to change who you are to succeed. You just need to show value in what you do. And finally, just to finish off, when I think about my role as a lecturer, as an academic, in all of this, I like to think that I try to plant these very, very small seeds that one day I hope to have a great effect, but at the level where I can what I can control, to empower other women. So, for example, I teach international economics, which is a module for third year students, and I observe that during presentations, men usually, if you just compare just the presentations of men and women, men usually, because they are more confident or forced to be confident, which is also something bad about sexism, right? To force men to always behave in such a way. That apparently you would think that perhaps some of these, the grades, the relative grades of men in comparison to women will be higher. But then when you take away the element of confidence in terms of content, the presentations are brilliant. So bringing this, I bring this to attention of the women that present in my module to say that this is not, being confident is not part of the criteria. It's okay to have your experience and to present what you have learned the way you are. Feedback is also very important. Share my experience as I'm doing now. And finally, we are trying to develop a mentoring program for women just to connect current students with students that have already graduated and that are out there and working, and how they can bring their experience to help our current students to navigate this gender imbalances in economics. So I'm going to stop right here, and I hope we are not too, oh my God, okay, I took a bit longer than I expected, right? Thank you.
Of the Q&A session.
Right.
So this is the opportunity for you to ask any questions you have for any industry, any speaker, or over there, any questions you have, curiosity, so they share their journey and the experiences so far. Anyone who would like to start?
I need to get the microphone. Yeah. I have a quick question to our speakers who from the industry. So I'm finishing my PhD in finance, trying to get involved in this industry. And I wonder, what's your insight about the overlap between finance and economics? So specifically about corporate finance and microeconomics. Well, I also noticed working. So yeah, and also when I was doing my bachelor's for the module in corporate finance, and that's why I was kind of like, something like this. And what I found, at least for me, is having that like year and a half at KPMG got me into my economist role at not at the like entry level, so I handle at 6th level. So I think especially macroeconomics, which is more when we do consultancy, that's more macroeconomics. So it's taking like company revenue data and profit data and funding data, and it's doing things like what is the impact of this company on the local economy or something like that. That's like an example thing that we do. And the overlap is massive. Like there's what you learn in your finance module is so helpful, things like that, because you're coming in, whereas a full economist who has had no finance training doesn't know what a balance sheet looks like and things like that. So I think it's a big advantage.
I think okay. And the next question. All right, can I ask one of our speakers? If you had one advice to advise your younger self, what that would be? Yeah, I will start.
Yeah, my advice, which I hope got from the presentation, would be to not doubt yourself at the feeling stage and to not feel like you have to be good at anything. Like I still to this day hate maths. I did not really enjoy econometrics. It stressed me out thinking I have to be this genius at econometrics to be able to do economics. It's just not the case. Now, I appreciate that you guys are in this different world where AI and all these things, like you're going to have to be involved in these kind of tools, but just don't feel like you have to do what everyone else is doing. Go down, be confident in the interests that you have, take those things forward because eventually it will work out. And yeah, you have to have that basic knowledge, but like job, well, you said work, when you get to the world of work, it's a million times easier than university, and the job will teach you what to do. Like they're not expecting you to start a job and know what to do. So just being right. What I wish I had told myself instead of being like pretty much the same. It's thinking that it's okay to not have a plan, but I think just need to have the confidence that whatever comes, I'll figure it out. And I think for me, even if I had, just because you had this sort of self-doubt and worry, even if I've got 100 experience or examples in the past where I have figured it out, I think this is different this time. I can't figure this out. But you know that you will. And it's kind of hard in the moment, but it doesn't work out. It will be fine. So I think an advice I would give myself is just, it will be fine. Just get through it and so, yeah, you know, sit with the discomfort, but also kind of try and work your way through it.
I think I would expand on an advice that I was giving before. I remember just before I did my Viva, which is when you present your PhD thesis, and of course you're very nervous because you have worked for many years to that very day. And I was very nervous, and my mom was like, "Oh yeah, of course you're gonna succeed." And I was like, "Mom, you don't know anything about economics. How can you haven't read my thesis? How can you tell them?" But I have a friend who said to me that what I needed to trust is not that necessarily I was going to be successful in that very moment with my PhD thesis, but that I had to trust the pathway. I had to trust that whatever would be the outcome of that day, I would be able to deal with that, whatever way I could. So I would say, if I could say something to my earlier self, is just trust the pathway. It doesn't matter what you decide to do. The answers will come. You will learn with the process. So.
Any other question from the audience?
I wanted to ask some advice on how to maintain kind of a work-life balance in such an intense field such as economics. So keeping yourself informed and doing your best at work.
Yes, that's what I started. I was thinking about it. I'm just thinking in terms of because this was one of the most important things to me when I'm looking for a job. I have so many hobbies outside of work. I'm saying in the presentation, I thought going into consultancy, I work until 10 p.m. Just not. So this is really important to me. And it is really difficult because you have to balance within the job, you have to balance the day-to-day job, but also keeping up to date with what's going on in the world, which can be really difficult. And I found within working hours, what I do is just like first hour of every day, that's blocked off for me to do like wider research or admin that I need to do at work. And then it's just done because no one wants to do it. So, you know, you can do all the things that you're not actually like being asked to do, and then you start your real job. In terms of balancing your time outside of work, my biggest advice to everybody just having a first job is start the job as you need to go on. What's had this advice from my dad of like, don't be afraid, even though it's your first job, to say like, I'm not working overtime. I'm not paid to work overtime, so I'm not going to work overtime. You're allowed to say things like this. And if you start like that, people will know to expect it. Whereas if you start like, oh, I'll just do a few more hours and whatever, people will expect you to be doing it. So just be firm.
I had a slightly different experience in that when I started, I thought that I need to know the details. I actually didn't have a very good work-life balance early on. Just like I was saying, yes to a lot of things. I think for me, it got better over time. I probably got more efficient, got more able to pick out which are now the opportunities I will say yes to. If it's not hell yes, then I'm not saying yes to that. I generally tend to be sort of a morning person. So what I've now done is, and there's just too many meetings at work, which I don't like, and it doesn't get you to do the analysis of the coding. So I've now blocked up like the entire morning. No one can bother me. The bar for having a meeting in the morning before 11 for me is too high. So I have that time where I'm just focusing and getting the biggest task out of the way. And usually like in the evening is when my brain sort of slowing down a little bit, and that's when I try to schedule the meetings a little bit. So it sort of, I guess, it doesn't happen for me from day one. It took me a good 2-3 years to figure out what makes me more efficient at which time, and what are the little hacks I'm going to have for this. And there's this, so I used to previously have my Outlook open. Anytime that little email icon comes up, oh, let's see what this email is. No, so I'm now like, don't have my Teams on or Outlook on in this sort of morning, let's say 9 till 11, and I do my stuff, and I don't care who is trying to reach out to me. I mean, obviously, like certain people can reach out, but I think for me, like drawing those and communicating that with the team, they had these stand-ups they tried to do like daily at a certain time, and I said, look, I want to focus on this, so can we push that? So it takes a bit of time. It didn't happen for me from day one. I mean, it's good advice that, you know, you should start it as we need to go on. Fortunately, my employer is good in that they do want me to have a bit of work-life balance. I just didn't have it initially, but it took me a while to get around it and figuring out what works for me.
I think that work-life balance is a constant struggle. It's not something you get sorted today and then you're sorted for the rest of the month or even the rest of the week. I think it's something that you have to always pay attention to and see, as I mentioned before, sometimes it's okay to say no, and you have to define what are your boundaries and how much you're willing to give. Sometimes it's really important to be flexible because maybe it's something really important for you to achieve. But sometimes it's also very hard not to get into this mindset that you're just saying yes to everything because you want to perform at the highest level always, and that's of course not healthy. And I think this becomes particularly hard when you have children, which is not my case, but from what I've seen, other female colleagues reporting, it's an extra challenge that, of course, you also have to bring into the equation. Right?
Just to understand academic, it took me many, many years to manage to say no is have a balance, but I think the important thing is what the other speaker said, but also to prioritize which task every day needs to be done. Some tasks can be put the next week. Of course, when we teach our parties, our lectures, this is stuff to be done, and to block time for yourself, and then be more strategic, say yes to things that they will help you in your career, and say no to things that they're not useful for you. Any other questions? Yes.
I would like to better talk more about self-subjects because frequently I've been online and economics. Self-subject. Yeah.
I think for me, the links with the imposter syndrome that heard from our speakers, and maybe the society's expectations that a woman maybe cannot achieve certain levels. Now, of course, they're changing, and the view for expectations, and as women, maybe we set ourselves more often. And this is what it brings us self-sabotage at work. I think from my experience at the work, being in a very dominated academic, economics department, that was a learning from experience, something that I don't have an example for now to think about. But
So I think, like I said, every time I make a decision, there's like so much that I do let myself 1 or 2 days to just sit in it and feel all of that, feel a bit bad and do whatever my brain is doing for 1 day. But I do time it because I think that needs to get out of it. That's just how my brain works. It needs to get out. I try to write it down because often, when I look back at these journals that I've written down, I laugh after 6 months, looking at why I'm really worried about this. But it's helpful to have that. And I do let it feel, but obviously I have a time box of that. I think this is where having a group of people, your kind of trusted advisors almost helps. Because I would then go to these people who are my friends and at work, they understand the situation, and I'll sort of blurt out a lot of these things that's going through my head. And often you are more unkind to yourself than you would be to your friend, or your friend would be saying, "What are you talking about? These are the reasons you should not be thinking about X, Y, Z." So it's kind of helpful to, again, like let it out, vent again to them, but then giving you a bit more structure to think about. And then after doing all of that, is the time to think, how am I going to be? Well, actually, also in that bit is I try to reflect on, is there actually, what's deeper in there? Is there a bit of fear or something I'm avoiding in feeling this? And what is that thing I'm avoiding? Because often you're avoiding the thing that is going to help you grow. And so it's sort of figuring that out, I think. And so, yeah, and then it just takes a bit of time. But then I try to think about it more logically and try to tell myself constantly that, no, that, there are multiple reasons as to why what you're thinking is not right. You've done this before, and so you can do it. It's just, I think, I try to let myself sit in the discomfort for a bit, but then think constructively, what can I go doing forward? Going forward.
I already mentioned that, yeah, I missed something and the way that I stop myself from self-sabotaging is remembering all the speakers I've heard of really experienced successful female economists talking about how they felt and still feel the exact same. Yeah. It's not stopped them becoming deputy minister of economic policy. It's not stopped them from becoming Grateful Leaves. It's not stopped them. So it's not going to stop you. It might, the only difference is self-sabotage just makes you take more time to like get to that next step. So it's having that, like, all the advice that they gave was just force yourself, or pretend that you don't have this self-sabotage and you just go in and be like, yeah.
Another very good advice that I also got from my supervisors was, when you're feeling that way, fake it until you make it, so, because if you're not trusting yourself, and it's sometimes it's purely emotional, because you look back, you have, for example, great experiences of presenting and teaching and so on, but you may be setting the bar to a level that I think no one can ever reach, because perfection, there is no such a thing as perfection, right? So I mean, maybe fake it until you make it, that's the best way to go.
I think to add to that is to be kinder to ourselves as women. Remember this, and this is a part of networks and friends, family, and perhaps mentors, so that they will advocate for you and be there for you and remind you of what you are and what you can do. Any final question? So I have a final question. I was wondering, given that in academia we have a lot of issues having the AI at the moment, and at Imperial College we have a lot of people, academics and professionals working together, how we can help our students and like using AI and also change our assessment. I think it's a big in academia. I'm wondering also first what's happening is at Leeds, and then in industry, how do you see the future going on for our graduates at the moment, and how AI might impact the work at
I think this is a huge challenge, especially in terms of assessment, because I think in terms of learning, AI can be quite good, right? Teaching our students not to just blindly believe in everything AI is saying, because there's been some research around some misleading information sometimes there, right? But generally, I think it's very good for learning purposes. You know, it really helps. I think if I think back when I was an undergraduate student, Google wasn't the best. It was very hard. Internet was slow, so it wasn't great. So I think AI just really organized things and it saves a lot of time. And when it comes to the assessment, I think that's the real challenge because you really, if you have an assessed coursework, for example, you really need to separate those students who are using AI effectively from those who are not. So sometimes you can spot when there is AI type of writing because some sentences are just like empty of content and critical thinking, and especially when you request students to work on specific readings. So, but apart from this, I think this is a bit of a challenge, but I see AI as a positive thing, and we have to adapt to this new way in the world, new way of doing things, which helps as well. Students working, for example, with any form of data collection, trying to find new methodologies, getting help to hold things on data. This can be quite helpful.
So on a personal level, when I did my data science master, I finished in 2022. It was all Stack Overflow, finding out how to figure out code. 3 years on, when I'm trying to now apply it, it's incredible how much the world has changed in just like a few years, and in fact, probably a few months. And there's GitHub Copilot who literally does all the coding better than I will. Now, what is then my role as a data scientist, right? I do think there is actually no substitute to understanding what is going on and the logic behind it. So I'm sort of glad that I did the master's when I did, because I have to understand how things are written, like how the packages work, how the functions work, which now we could get a code written. It works, it gives you the output, but you maybe don't know what's going on as much. So I think I do use it on a daily basis to help me code, but that's only when I can understand, I'm very clear on the logic, and particularly like the framework for thinking about something and doing your workflow logically, like how would you apply it to your problem? I think the bit where I don't think I can sort of help, at least not now, is it's very messy when you deal with humans. Because ultimately, yeah, you can write this code and you're going to, let's say, change a process. But other people have to use it to convince other people, influence other people, and get them to your way of thinking. Or let's say if you're doing a lot of stakeholder management, those are human skills. So I think it would be worth kind of investing a bit of time in that, like how you have better communication, how can you be a better leader, that sort of thing, which I don't think it's kind of AI can help in that sense. The other thing I think it really allows you to be quite creative. So currently at the bank with the multiple transformation team, we're very much interested in how different sort of generative AI can help us. So I'm trying to think about different ways in which we could use, like currently, let's say the way we do our monetary policy sort of analytical work, how we arrange things. There's a lot of information for the monetary policy committee members. Is there a way to set up an agent that's particular to this sort of thing? So not just using sort of Copilot, Claude, etc., but like really setting up your agents for this particular task. Like how can I feed an internal notes, internal analysis, and get it to create a summary for the monetary policy policymaker, or maybe create an agent that would be a monetary policy maker and say what sort of decision they would take. But it's more to sort of explore areas in which like we may not have thought about, and as like an assistant sort of thing, rather than sort of a replacement. But I think it does allow you a lot in terms of creativity and learning something, but I would say still focus on understanding what really is going on inside, because otherwise it's really hard to sort of create the solution or be more creative in the way that you want to. So that's this question to someone who is still at home, and I can imagine that like entering the job market with this thing where all these new stuff like that and get replaced across. Maybe just to kind of reassure you that it's not the replacement jobs, at least I speak from our company, we are nothing has changed in terms of how we are hiring. And as a kind of like consultant, your job, you're responsible from like the start to the end of a project or something you're doing. So you're responsible for any kind of process, like data, analysing the data, writing a report, presenting it, all these kind of things, quality assurance. So it's how we're using it, it is more about efficiency. So what parts of that process can it make quicker? Things like really simple things like can it copy from the charts from an Excel to like PowerPoint? Can it give you the code to write that, to be able to automate that instead of you taking time to have to do individual one. So I'd say it's more about like learning when it's important to use it, because it is kind of certainly not at a level where it is actually usable to get information, at least the job that I do. Like if I write a question in Google, I want to know about like coach units, and I want to know like one of the most important government project in coach university over the next 5 years. How I write that question changes what it tells me. It tells you what we want to know. It doesn't actually tell you like unbiased information. So I really would advise you all to really restrain how you use it in terms of when you come to like communicate your findings and your analysis and writing things down. Because at the moment it's something that we like discourage people to use it often, especially when we have advice introducing that kind of stuff. It's so obvious when someone has written a cover letter or had a script in front of them, and it's literally a to know. So I would say invest in how to use it to save yourself time, not how to use it to replace your skills and thinking. Yeah.
I think we're going to close the panel. Thank you so much. And we're going to have a certain coffee.
I don't think you can skip, given that we're running late, so that we have enough time for the network.
Yeah, no issue. I just wanted to finally to, I know we took a lot of time and we're running out of time, but it will be very helpful for us, for UKWEN, if you can spend 1 minute to scan the QR code for our survey. We have been leading this initiative for 3 years, and it's very important to continue going to universities and organize these events, and it's nice to show the impact. So thank you so much. And just to close the event, and please take some time, and then we'll have some refreshment, having our speakers outside, so you can ask more questions if you like. Thank you so much.
Sorry to use it to save ourselves time. That's what I'm talking. One of you is just to leave them like my work. Because I mean it helps. Strategy tells us. Yes. So yes, it's more like on my other knowledge, just more technical stuff. And I'm sorry, I didn't need to read about that. Obviously, and this that's with yeah, there is some equals of models in this school. So this was a very solid. Now I'm thinking the English in the transfer school. So I'm testing exactly so that's people. And since yeah, I feel like other trying for this basically it's yes,
That's mine, isn't it? That one, yes. Yes.
I think
Yeah, maybe, yes, on the stairs or something like, I'll go get my phone as well, because I've lied too.
Yeah. Just waiting until at least finish to give it.
Why it's from point for is like
Actually, track for all the work. This is go outside.